Welcome to the Teaching Liberty podcast. I am Stephanie Edmond, your host and creator of Teaching Liberty. And today I am here with Leeann to talk about how to get involved in your school district. But first, you know what I'm going to need you to do. Go ahead, hit that like button. If you aren't already, I'm not really sure why. Maybe you're new here. Welcome. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you can get notified. We do these podcasts live every single Monday, plus other content coming throughout the week. And if you want to get more involved, support even more, head over to teachingliberty.org and become a member today. Lots of exclusive content over there. We got a merch shop. You get 20% off, all sorts of cool stuff. So again, teachingliberty.org. But today I have with me, like I said, Leeann. She's a mom of two boys in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And if you've been following anything in the news about schools, school boards, all the crazy stuff that's going on in class, I'm sure you've heard of Westchester, Pennsylvania. So again, I have here with me Leeann. Leeann, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit more about you, your background, how long you've been in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the age of your boys.
Okay, I'm Leeann. I have two boys, ages 9 and 7. They are in the Westchester Area School District. We've been in Westchester about 13 years now, and my kids are in 1st and 3rd grade. So we've been in the public school system for that long. Before being a stay-at-home mom, I was a vet tech for 18 years. So.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And I think it's awesome that you're able to stay at home and be with your boys and get involved in schools. It's definitely something that now that I'm out of the system, it's something that I'm looking to set my life up in that way where I can both be there for my son that way and figure out some way to, keep the income coming in. But so that's your background. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what's going on in Westchester, because I mean, all over the country, there's really kind of been this uprising of parents going head to head with school boards and local health departments. And I think a lot of it is fallout from COVID, but it was boiling up before. A lot of the critical race theory stuff or just critical theory things in general, whether it have to do with the race or the gender and the identity. I mean, that's definitely why I first was like, I need to get on YouTube and start, building something to be able to push back because I sensed it coming, but COVID really blew the lid off. So give us like the summary of specifically how everything started to go down over there in Westchester, Pennsylvania.
So for me, my personal experience was I started getting involved just in February because of the masks. My first
Okay,
grade,
so just right here, February
yeah,
2022. All
yeah,
right, so you kind of like took the
I
back
paid
seat.
attention,
Okay.
right?
But
My
you
kids
were
were
trying to be a good person, right? You were just
right,
like, okay.
right. So
Give us some of that as well.
my first school board meeting, I spoke about the masks. My first grader would cry every day about the
Oh,
masks.
no.
I don't want to wear a mask. I don't think it's fair. You don't have to wear a mask all day because I stay home.
Mm,
So that led me to speaking the first time. And since then, I have spoken 4 or 5 times, and I've been pretty vocal, both in emails to the superintendent and at the school
mm.
itself. I also do lunch and recess duty twice a week there at the school for my boys, and I get to see a lot that happens that I'm kind of not too thrilled with. The second time I spoke was in regards to putting a fence in the elementary playground. In our school is the house for the most severely disabled autistic or children with autism, and we don't have a fence in the playground. And
Mm.
the children elope. There's plenty of elopements that happen that would warrant this. So the more I got involved, the more I found out. So I just
And so what I really love too is it just sort of goes to show that everybody has their moments, right? For a lot of parents, it might have been earlier on. For a lot of parents, it might have happened more recently. Like you, for a lot of parents, it hasn't happened
mhm,
yet. It's about
right.
what's that thing that's going to peel back the onion, if you will, of what's going on in the school district. I do know more generally speaking, so I just want to kind of like reach back before February 2020 to and how much were you aware of the other things that were going on in Westchester? Because again, it's kind of really been a magnifying glass of things that are going on. I think in particular with the gender stuff, you
Mm,
guys had a lot of issues with like I remember mom like read the book out
mhm.
loud at a school board meeting. I believe that was you guys. And it was they were like, "Oh, you can't read that here." And she's like, "Well, this isn't a library in our school, so I
Right.
can't read it here."
Yeah.
So how much were you aware of that kind of stuff going on? Why didn't you get involved in those moments?
So I wasn't really aware. I mean, I was a little bit because of the remote learning. My kids were both home. Not much was said on Zoom. I mean, that was a little difficult just to keep track of of itself. But I wasn't aware until I started speaking, and people reached out to me and said, "Oh, well, this is happening and this is happening," and I'm like,
Oh.
"Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Westchester has a lot of social emotional learning,
Mm,
which I spoke about at this last school board meeting. I feel like it's a parent's responsibility to talk to their children about social emotional learning.
right.
We started it from the, moment my kids were born, as babies, reaching for someone's hair. Oh, you can't do that. Hitting someone. That's all social emotional learning. That comes from home. Right.
Okay.
And I don't think that it's a one size fits all program.
Right.
And
So
that,
I want to go into that for a second, but I do want to just point something out. So you said I kind of was prompted to go because of the mask thing. And then
yeah.
once I went, I just went. I didn't know anybody. I went because of this issue. Then I met other people and they were like, "Hey, did you
Right.
know that's also
Yeah.
related to this thing or it's rooted to this thing or there's this other
Yeah.
thing going on here?" And I think that's a really important point for parents to know is like you aren't alone.
Right.
So many times I've talked to parents and they're like, "Well, I never said anything cuz I didn't know if other people felt that way, or I didn't know where these people were, or I didn't go out to the rally or to the protest because I didn't have anybody to go with."
Right.
And see, that's the thing is that's the starting point. You
Mhm.
go and that's where you meet the people.
Yeah.
Right? So don't wait to meet the people before you go and do something. You need to
Right.
go to do something. And that's how you will meet the people. And that's how you will learn more. And that's how you'll start connecting all of these dots and
Mhm.
realize that you know what the masking it's not just masking in and of itself, it's actually connected to this funding called the ESSER funding, and under
Yeah.
that funding there's all sorts of stipulations. And
Mhm.
oh, you know what, that policy, there's a similar policy that's pouring all this federal funding into
Mhm.
districts that's driving something like social emotional learning. So let's go ahead and start unpacking some of these issues. So you're telling me the first step you took is boom, you go to that meeting. So everybody, that's your first actionable step. Go to the meeting.
Mhm.
Go out to an event. Go say something. All right.
Yeah.
And from there, tell me, start unpacking some of the things that you're learning about and where that's taking you on your journey now.
So I didn't even know about the ESSER funding until someone told me about it. And I looked into it. And I went to the next school board meeting, which they were discussing the ESSER funding, and I just listened. And
Right,
I,
and ESSER, guys, is elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. It was the funding that was allocated to schools under the larger COVID relief funding bill that Congress did.
mhm. And our school district has so far gotten $5 million, and they're set to get another $5 million.
Mhm.
Right. And I don't know what that money goes to. Even at the meetings, it wasn't really discussed. It was cleaning products, masks, things like that. But did we not have that stuff in the budget prior to COVID? Were we not doing cleaning? I mean, I know we didn't have masks in the budget prior to COVID, but the cleaning and cleaning supplies, and I mean, it's a large amount of money. And
Right.
at that ESSER fund meeting or the financial meeting, I discussed the fence at Exton, and it did have the board members talking, which I was happy about, using that ESSER fund for the fence.
Right,
So at
because you
least I got
can
them talking.
allocate I don't know what the percentage is, but I know you can use up to a certain percentage of that ESSER funding for buildings and maintenance because they're doing
Right.
a big project here in our town.
Right. So I was just happy that at least the board members were talking about it there at that meeting. I was thrilled by that. And I'm happy to say that we are getting a fence.
See, and it's like things like that is they can't know until you go and you tell them
That's
about a lot of these things on the
yeah,
ground. And when it is something that's really like immediate safety needs, and you're saying you were there, and one of the reasons you realize is you're like, well, kids are kind of like running off all the time. If
mhm,
we just had a fence here, it wouldn't be a big
yeah,
deal. And I'm sure that fence actually really doesn't cost that much to put in the big scheme of things. So it's
right.
an easy, quick thing for them to do. While we do have bigger long-term issues in my district, I do see sometimes when it's like those very acute and kind of
Mhm,
like easier to fix things, they will be responsive.
right.
So
And
if you feel like you don't have a voice, you're not sure who to go to your board meeting. Reach out
right.
to your board members. They should
Mhm.
email you back.
Yes, yes. And I have reached out via email and they have responded. I mean, our superintendent does respond as well.
Okay, that's nice.
In a vague sort of way,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
you
they always do, they like
know.
to no, my favorite is when though, because like, there's board members who are more receptive than others. There's, like, board members sometimes will just respond with, like, copy and paste of a policy, and I'm like, "Hold on, that's the policy I was questioning you about,
Right,
like, I
right,
know what the policy is, I'm asking for you to explain this other thing in the context of that policy," but
right.
still.
Yeah. Eh, I mean, I will take that fence as a huge win. And I actually worked with another mother, and her son has autism, and
Mm,
he elopes. And I just mentioned it to my friend who's an autistic support teacher, and she said, "Oh, let me get you in touch with this woman."
right.
The more you talk, the more you find people who share your values, who agree with you, and can help make, things happen.
Yeah,
And
and I would say
this mother,
even
this
for
mother did try.
even for kids who don't have autism, like my son's
Right.
school has their playground runs along the street on one side of it, and they have a fence.
Right.
And I just think about my own son, like of course I'd want a fence there. It's right
Yeah.
along the street.
Yeah.
And what if a ball goes out, or they're just playing with their friends and they lose track of where they are? So yeah, fences and playgrounds are definitely good. They go well
It's
together.
kind of common sense, but
Yeah, yeah.
we have 11 elementary schools in our district, and 9 of the 11 are not fenced. So
Wow.
2. One is a brand new school that they just opened this year. That has a fenced
All
in
right, at
playground.
least they got that right?
Right. Well, they're doing a renovation on another elementary school, and it's $26 million renovation. So I asked, "Does it have a fence in the playground?" And they said, "No, it does
Oh,
not." And
They
that's not
they
in the
did
budget.
say like, yes, of course it does," as they, like, penned it in. Come on, guys.
So I was at the meeting when they approved the budget, the board approved the budget for that renovation. And I went back to the next meeting and I said, one would think with $26 million renovation that putting a fence in a playground would be a priority. And it
Right.
just doesn't seem like they are asking the staff what they need, what they want, and that's
Right. Yeah,
makes
these bureaucracies, they get so big, it's hard to track things. I don't know, the school board in my town, for example, is not a paid position, it's not a full-time
no,
position, they have meetings
right,
once a week. So, it's not that I don't, sympathize with these people,
right,
like, they are volunteering their time, though
yeah,
I do know a lot of them do it as a stepping stone to higher up, political
yeah,
positions.
right,
So, if I see they're kinda doing that, it's like you're putting in what you're trying to get out, so
yeah,
do your job. Um, but at the same time, it would be nicer if they didn't try to. I think the problem is they just try to do too much, right? And then they're always looking for cheap money, easy money. Something that they do here in my district is we don't have any cohesiveness from year to year with programs because
mhm,
we need money. So what they do is they take the grant to like pilot some program. So they do a program for 1, 2 years and then they move on to the next one. And
right,
there's no cohesiveness. The teachers
right,
are constantly have to be like learn and trained
yeah.
in things. And so
And there's no consistency there
right.
for the children either. And we have a large district of 1,200 children. I
Mm.
mean, across the district. That's a lot of kids to keep shifting, different programs and curriculum
Wait,
on.
1,200 or 12,000?
I'm sorry, 12,000.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I
12,000.
was you said you had 11 elementary
Yeah.
schools, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
that's just
Sorry.
a little bit smaller than I think the district where I am has 16,000, so I
Okay.
think you guys are a little bit smaller than us,
Right.
but it's around the same amount.
Yeah.
Uh, s So
And
let's circle back around to the social emotional learning stuff,
yeah,
because that's where a lot of this comes in now, is because not only are they doing that same thing where they're like piloting all these programs, because the social emotional stuff is all pretty new, but they're getting money incentives to do
mhm,
it.
yeah,
And then it's adding another thing that teachers are responsible to do and have to be trained in.
mhm,
And and it's just like, can we teach the kids to read maybe?
right.
Do
And
some math? How about that?
right. So at the last school board meeting, I had a couple points to discuss, and one was social emotional learning. And I asked, is it almost like a therapy type of a lesson? And are the teachers trained to be therapists? How much does this program cost the district? And obviously you don't get answers at a board meeting. You just go up and say your piece and
Right.
go away. um, but our school implemented something this year that is these color zones, right? So if you are yellow, you are excitable, anxious, whatever. If you're red, you're angry, upset. And it basically correlates to like a busy bin almost, where if you're yellow and you're anxious, then you go and get a toy, like a fidget, from the yellow bin, right? What is that teaching our children to how to deal with their emotions? It's not. It's essentially saying, okay, well, let's just distract you with this toy. And how does that relate to real life, right? I mean,
Right. I mean, there might be some validity to it if it's done in a certain way, in a certain context or something. But when it gets watered down to these really like basic, almost cutesy things you can do
mhm,
in your classroom, it really loses any of the like basis from which it was developed
right,
on.
right.
So yeah, and I'm not against social emotional
Me
learning.
either.
It's just that I think the way that it's being done is, I mean, we schools did social emotional learning when I grew up. It was just called like a club. It was
Right.
called like, oh, you hung out in a teacher's room during class during lunchtime, or you played a sport. You know,
Hmm.
to me that's social emotional learning.
Right.
And the school where I used to work, we had a couple of social emotional learning programs that came in, but I really liked them. One was a meditation program,
Okay.
which we actually had to stop doing because then they were getting sued in Chicago because of like religious rights or whatever. But I found it as somebody who's, of faith, I think that religion like adds to my practice. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. It was meditation. So we would stop twice a day and kids could either meditate or just like put their heads down and sleep. And
Right.
I found for myself as a teacher, they get so intense, just like back to back to back. It was really nice to have 15 minutes to just kind of stop. Everything was
Hmm.
quiet, the lights would go off. And I don't think many schools do that at all. And it's definitely kind of one of those out there practices. But I found it so effective because kids did not fall asleep as much in class.
Oh,
Kids
wow.
were
Okay.
just like more calm, and
Right.
like we don't necessarily like have I think there is some data to back it up, but a lot of it was
Mhm.
just like the general anecdotal experience of the teachers as a whole, which if you have enough teachers saying, I'm seeing this impact and saying, yes, bring this program back, I think that's meaningful.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. You were going to have us say something?
So they do in our school what's called second step as well, and that's kind of like managing your feelings and belly breathing and things like that. And I am all for that. We do that at home with my kids. I
Mhm.
mean, when they were babies, they would have tantrums like, or toddlers, and it would be kind of a relax, let's breathe, take a breath, and then we'll figure it out. So I do agree with all of that. I mean, I think that is great, but does it get lost in what's done at school, but we don't know it's done at school? The parents, if they don't know it's done at school, then I can't do the same thing,
Right. You
right?
can't support it.
I can't support it. And that, I did speak about transparency, and that is transparency in my opinion. Like, I want to know what my kids are doing to settle down or calm down at school so we can continue at home if it works for them.
Right. Yeah, I feel like parents should be able to like come in and out of the building almost like as they please. It's tough. It's one of those tough things though, because it's like you don't really want strangers wandering around the
Right.
building, or like I don't know. Sometimes parents can even like have like just like be weird or like do weird things or whatever. So it is. tough. But at the same time, I would ideally love to cultivate the community where parents can just like kind of
Mhm.
come in and hang out. Or one thing that I used to love to do as a teacher is like have guest teachers. And
Right.
so I would just like bring somebody in and they would team up for an in content lesson, something that went along with my history content. So like I brought in a small business owner and we were doing like the Industrial Revolution. So we kind of like, like that.
Yeah.
And I always found that was a really cool way to like open up my classroom and
Mhm.
just in terms of like I would always invite my principals in or my assistant principal or any other teacher could come to my classroom and check out what we were doing. So I would love the same for parents. Now I know one of the barriers to that and something that I experienced myself as like a single working mom is having the time to do that. Like having the
Mhm.
time to get in the classroom, to hold these people accountable, to know what your kid is learning. And so I definitely I empathize with that as well. It's like you send your kid to school and it's just like you kind of
Mhm.
like gotta hope that they're
Yeah.
learning well and like what you do at home as well.
Right.
So how do we, how do you what do you say to those parents?
I mean, for me, I have the time because I am a stay-at-home mom. I have been since my first son was born, 9 years ago. And I've always been a homeroom parent every single year. And this year was the first year that we were allowed to volunteer, or no, I won't say the first year, but since COVID,
It's COVID,
that
right?
we were allowed to come in for lunch and recess duty. And I think having a presence at the school, everyone knows me because I'm there twice a week.
Right.
I think that's really important. The teachers know me. I can reach out to them easily. They're very easily
Mm,
accessible. And that we have been so lucky that we've gotten fantastic teachers. And, but some aren't so lucky, where
right.
the teachers aren't as open and willing to communicate during the day while they're at work, with your child. So I will say I've been fortunate to have those really good relationships with the teachers. So that helps.
I think
And
another way that you can mimic that though, and something that I've done is just making the phone calls, right?
mhm,
So from the first day, if when I saw something I didn't like, I immediately reached out to the principal and the assistant principal and I left a message and I called them and I like kind of was consistently having conversations with them about things I didn't like about my son was telling me, or like they would send home like some mask thing, or like they
right.
still had barriers and shields up. Like even before school started, I called them and I made it known, like, hey, I'm not really for this COVID stuff. Like, where do you stand? And so to the point where they know if something crazy is going to happen, or like they sent home those like testing kits, the assistant principal called me first and he was like, hey,
Okay.
we're going to like do this thing. So even though I don't necessarily have a presence in the school, like
Right.
you can kind of, okay, do the phone calls.
Yeah.
His teacher, she sends the weekly email and I just respond to it. I ask questions. I, make sure. And I did actually go on a field trip with them when I had the opportunity.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and I was able to do that, thankfully.
Yeah.
I would say that's a thing too, is like you don't have to feel necessarily like you're alone. Like let these people know, like, hey, I'm watching you. Even if you like
Right.
can't like be on it as much as you would like to be, you can still let people know that you
Yeah.
care, and they'll preemptively kind of involve you if they
Yeah.
know there's an issue encroaching on something you care about.
Yeah. I mean, that's our job as parents to be involved in our kids' schooling. I mean, and I'm fortunate that I can be as involved as being a presence, a physical presence there. But if you can't, like you said, make the phone calls, introduce yourself to the teachers when you can. Um, Go to the school events. We have socials and we have, picnics and things like that. Be there. Go. I mean, we
Right.
just had an art show last week. It was adorable. I was there, with the
Yeah.
kids.
I will
So
say my son's school, as soon as they could have an event, the PTO put on an
yeah,
event,
yeah.
and there
Oh, that's
we had like over 100 kids there, I think, and the
right.
school's only like 400 kids big, so that was like a
Yeah, that's
big
another
part.
great way to be
Yeah,
involved is join the PTO if you can. I am personally not on the PTO,
right. I think one
but
thing that's made it easier actually is the online thing. I think that that's a positive outcome of things. Is I don't want every meeting to be online. I don't think it should be, but I think it makes school board meetings and things like the PTO or PTA or whatever we call it, the
so
PFO, I think
we
actually.
are PTO,
Okay. The you can access them online. And
right?
sometimes even for the school boards, like even if you can't actively pay attention, log in because they
Yeah,
see those
people.
numbers. And if they consistently see hundreds of people logging in to watch them, they change the way they act and they speak
Right.
and they run those things suddenly, you know? Like, I remember the first time the numbers spiked, the school board member who I have, like, a link with, a connect with, she texted me and she was like, "Whoa,"
Right.
like, you know? And that's another thing too is, like, make a couple friends on the school board because,
Mhm.
again, those positions don't represent so many people that they won't speak to you. There's
Right.
16,000 people in the district. You have 9 or how 8, 10 school board members. So they will get back to you. You will develop those relationships. And then when you need to send that text, you know, get that inside word, you have access to that
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did become friendly with someone on the school board recently as well.
There
So,
you go. See? And then you start
but
like seeing how the game is played a little bit and you're like,
right.
"Oh," and
Yeah.
it's like you hate it, but it's like, okay, you get it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I to go back to the school board real quick, I do think that they are very disconnected with what's happening on the ground at the schools, on that level. So to bring that to their attention, I think is a good thing too. I was there. I saw a kid run away, like I brought it to their attention and then it got them talking. So that's
I love it. So
just
do you guys
opening.
have any formal parent organizational structure? I know here in Stanford we started an organization called Stanford Parents United.
Okay.
And you know, the original issue that brought us together was the masking, but then we also kind of had a book that was being introduced into our schools that was mixed in there as well.
Okay.
And the idea isn't necessarily actually what your opinion is on masking or the book. The thing is that this no matter what your opinion is, the school board isn't listening. So we want to kind of
Right.
like uplift all parental voices. And then to the extent that some parents may not be able to be as actively involved as they would like to be able to know what their positions are, what they're looking for, what information they're looking for, and act as that bridge or that liaison between the two. So we can have more parents uh can, who can't be involved, you know, like directly, but they can be involved kind of on that second front. So when we
Right.
do really be like, hey, this is an important thing. Like, I know you can't really come out to much, but this is the thing you should come out to. This is the action that you can take, the email that you can send in 2 minutes. So I think that's another way for parents who don't feel like they have the time or whatever it is, whatever is holding them back, get involved on that second layer. Find
Right.
a local organization. Do you guys have something like that?
I mean, there's a lot of groups on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know. That's just one thing I'm gonna stay away
I
from.
I hate
Um,
Facebook so much. Like, I just hate the way it looks. It's just like you have this thing over on the right side and on the left
yeah.
side, and then you have like 12 ads coming at you, and they
Right.
tell you like your friend left a comment on somebody else's picture who you're not a friend with. It's like
Right.
so much, but yes,
I
Facebook.
I have never been on Facebook, so I don't even know what it looks like. But that's
Oh.
one thing that I stay away from. But I do know that there are some groups, the Moms for Liberty, they have a Chester County group, but I'm not involved in that because but I do have a good group of 20 people that we text and
Okay.
we keep each other informed.
Yes.
And I really just try to like speak out as much as possible and just speak as much as possible, really, and then you kind of get this one person who's like, oh, wait, I didn't know that. Tell me more,
Right.
and you just keep talking and people will listen and people will,
I like that. So
agree.
it's I do know that there are organizations that exist in Westchester, PA. Like you said, Facebook is, I think, one of the places where a lot of those live. I know that's where I got initially connected with a lot of the parents that ultimately became Stanford Parents United, even though I'm not on Facebook that much. Like,
Right.
I go check it out every once in a while on our local school Facebook group. And
Right.
then from there, one of the moms who's like the connector, I love it because everybody's kind of talent shines through. Like this, she like her, you know, I'm really good at speaking out and articulating certain ideas, and I'm not really scared to say it, you know. And this woman, she's really good at policy, and she's really good at
Mhm.
connecting people together. And so she would like from the Facebook group, she would identify people that she'd be like, oh, we kind of, you know, like we agree on this, we agree on this, and she would side message us, and then that would feed us into a chat.
Right.
A text chat, and then ultimately it grew from there. So I do think Facebook is a good way into, again, if you whether you want to be on that first line or that second line, to find that organizational structure that can because we need shortcuts. We need people that help us sort through the information. Everybody can't do anything,
Mhm.
everything. And then the other thing I like that you said was like leaning into your talent. You're like, I know there's other stuff in there. I could be more involved in these other ways. This is what I feel really good at. And so I think that people shouldn't feel like they have to do it all. They
Right.
should feel like it's all on their shoulders. I want you to think about, okay, what do I have and what's the best way that I can do it that works with my life? And as I get more into that, I'm aware of other ways I can expand, get more involved, create more of a long-term structure, what have you. So just start with the thing that you're good at and don't feel like you have to do it all.
Right. Yeah, and that's where I started. I mean, not that the masks were small because they weren't. That was quite large. But then I talked about a fence. Like this is, I mean, to me, again, common sense that like this should be here, you know.
Right.
And I spoke out and I consistently emailed and, wanted to be included or at least made aware of what was happening. And it's happening, you know.
Yeah.
So
So what else is on the horizon? We talked a little bit about the SEL stuff. You told me about the
mhm.
masking, the fence. What are some of the other issues you've heard about that you're looking more into? What are some other actions that you're planning to take in the coming weeks, months, maybe looking even ahead into next school year?
Well, so I am removing my children from the school district, you know.
Okay,
I
okay.
Yeah.
Say it. Don't say it like I'm
Yeah.
my kids
Well,
out of these
yeah,
schools.
I'm taking my children out of the school. My 7-year-old is really struggling in school. And I think it's the large class size, which is a major concern for him. And again, if you think about it, he's 7 in first grade, right? He never knew normal school
Mm.
ever. We started last year totally remote in kindergarten, which was not fun.
I
Um,
can only imagine.
yeah. So we started remote in kindergarten. We did that for a couple months, and then we went hybrid, where he was going 2 days a week and remote 3 days a week, right? And then we finally went back full time with a mask on. And then this year they had masks on. Actually got my children an exemption. And it was the same day that I spoke out at the school board meeting. I had my exemption for my children, but I decided to still speak because there are parents that won't speak, right? And they feel the same way I do. And if they see me saying that, then maybe they're like, you know what, I could do that. If she could do that, I could do that, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, and he's struggling. So we've decided as a family, my husband and my two boys, they were involved in the conversation, and we are moving to a private school next year.
Okay, to a private school.
Well, yeah, Catholic school. We're
Okay.
gonna
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So I've
So,
made the same commitment that I'm not exactly sure what the situation is gonna be, but I wanna pull my son out.
right.
And he's in kindergarten. It's this year, so he didn't have to do his first year of kindergarten remote, which I was so grateful for. I was like, even
Yeah,
last year, I was like, I'm so thankful that he's in preschool again this year,
right.
and not having to deal with like kindergarten. So I mean, he started with masking and like the social distancing and a lot of
Right.
that stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't definitely as bad as the previous year.
Mm.
Uh,
And
but
I mean, what are we teaching our kids when we're putting them in masks and keeping them
right, that's what
apart?
I'm
That
saying.
everyone around them, including themselves, is possibly sick. I
Right.
mean, that is not a
And so
good
it's like,
way.
maybe that'll be over next year, but I don't think so. I think a lot of this stuff is gonna be continuing to be an issue. And, he's not really at the point where he's having to read these, like, books yet. Like, we had the PANS Project or Genderqueer. A lot of that stuff is later on, but it trickles down, right?
Right.
The teachers, a lot of the professional development that the teachers are getting has this stuff in it. So
Mhm.
it trickles into the
The class.
classroom and just
Yep.
like the increasingly compliance-based nature or like my son, when all the Ukraine stuff starts happening, my son comes home talking about Ukraine and we stand with
Mhm.
Ukraine and they have the Ukraine flags and this is nothing against the Ukrainian people. Like I
Right.
stand with the Ukrainian people. I also stand with the Russian people. You know who I'm
Right.
against? I'm against the oligarchs that are fighting
Mhm.
each other right now.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
just by being in that environment, my son is like learning the proper way to think and like the virtue
Mhm.
signal of the moment. And to me, it's like
Oh,
I don't want my son to like just be programmed to
right.
learn these things. And like thankfully at home, I tell him, I'm like, no, we don't do that. Like that's silly.
Right.
Like, of course we support the Ukrainian people and all people, but like them telling you like no, that's silly. And for him, he's so
Yeah.
little, kind of that's like the extent that I have to go with him, and it's my own version of propaganda, but I think it's the place of the parent to like
Mhm.
propagandize their child. Obviously,
Yeah.
there have to be extents to that, and that can become abuse at some point too, but
Right.
these are the conversations that we need to have. But yeah, like so I just don't even want my son in that environment. And again, it's nothing against even the people that work at the school. I went with his teacher on the field trip. I think she's a good person. Now
Yeah.
she wears a mask, even though she pulls it up and down all the time. And I don't want my son around a teacher who's wearing a mask. Like,
Yeah. My,
his assistant principal and principal, they're good people. They're responsive. And I
right.
think that they actually agree with me more than not, but they're in the system. And so they
Right.
have to do what the system pressures them to do if they want
Yeah.
to keep collecting their nice salary.
Right. Yeah, my son's teacher just recently removed her mask, which I was excited about. And he was excited about, he came home, he's
Right.
like, oh, she's not wearing a mask. I was like, that's wonderful. I
I
mean,
I think his teacher, like, takes it up and down all day because, like, I saw her, she would, like, wear it sometimes, but most of the time when she was talking, she would have it down. So I think she might wear it, but she has it down most of the
right.
time. But it's just like, I
And
don't
I
want
mean,
my son having an authority figure wearing that because even
right.
if I'm telling him and working against it, it's just like, no, like, we're
Right.
not, we don't do that. And we're not learning from people who do that.
And
And
I am all for sort of your personal choice with the masks, with
no, I'm done with it.
this.
I'm done with it. I think I'm done. I came out on
I
Twitter
was
the other
done,
day. I came out on
I
Twitter
was
the
done
other
for
day.
myself and my children a while ago,
I
you know.
know.
But I do understand that, if she's more comfortable, then that's it is what it is. I'm just happy that it's off now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just like, for me, it's like I want to believe in choice, but the problem with it is that when people
Wait.
choose to wear the mask, it makes it okay for the government to bring back mask
Yeah,
mandates
yeah,
anytime and take my choice away.
right. Yeah,
So
just don't
it
comply,
truly was only one person or like, very few people maybe, but I actually don't think teachers should be allowed to wear masks at all. Like even if there is general mask choice or whatever, I don't think that starting next year teachers should be allowed to wear masks even if it makes them feel good or they want to. I think that you need to find a non-student facing position if that's how you feel. I think you need to find another profession where you don't work with students because
Yeah.
the kids need to see your face.
Yeah, and that that ties into the delays in reading and speech and all that
And
stuff.
just
I mean,
general struggles, like how you said
right.
your son is having, I'm sure it's not just the mask, it was the
No,
online learning, it's just
yeah,
the
it's
times
been
the mask contribute to that.
right. Yeah, it definitely did. And that's his way of bringing it out is that simple, obvious answer of the mask.
Mm.
That's
So,
how he
and
does
I am planning to come out to Westchester,
it.
for filming for the
Okay.
documentary because
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on in Westchester. I know, Reopen PA, Rosica, I forget what her
Uh-huh.
first name is, Lee
Beth Ann.
Beth Ann. I was like,
Yeah.
not Leanne, you're Leanne.
Yes,
Beth
Beth Ann.
Ann, Rosica, she's
Yes.
been doing a lot of work, so we're gonna come out there and see her. We're gonna see Rachel. So
Yeah.
perhaps we can come see you guys as well,
Yeah, that'd
really
be great.
get into the specifics of those stories because I mean a kindergartner going through his first year of school and remote learning, that's exactly the light that we're trying to shine to show the struggles of these kids that have
Yeah.
just been overlooked. So let's
Yeah.
keep talking, make
Okay.
sure that works with our scheduling. I really appreciate you coming on here and
Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
sharing your experience. And again, I think that what I really love is we gave people very specific and actionable steps that they can take in
Yeah.
order to get involved. It wasn't just really super broad and like, oh,
Right.
you should get involved, rah, rah,
Yeah.
rah. But
But not give them the
exactly.
tools to do so. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So is there any, last words, anything you wanna leave the people with?
Um, I just feel like you have to talk. You have to open your mouth. And once you do, you will find people that agree with you. And then you can sort of ride that wave to where you need to go. That's how I feel. Yeah.
I would echo the same. So I appreciate you, Leeann, for coming on here. I appreciate everybody who's checking out this podcast with us live. Anybody who's going to be checking out this podcast later on, whoever you are, make sure you've smashed that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, because we do this here live every Monday, plus other content coming out throughout the week. And if you're feeling like you're a true Liberty lover, you really want to support what we're doing here on Teaching Liberty, head over to teachingliberty.org, become a member today, make a monthly contribution, and in exchange, you get a community of Liberty lovers from around the world, exclusive content, 20% off courses and merch, and so much more. Again, teachingliberty.org. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today. Thank you, Leeann.
Thank
And
you.
don't forget, I love your beautiful face.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.